Hello everybody, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to continue talking about how I prepared for a Sunday school lesson. This is part 4 of this series, so if you need to catch up, click on the channel and watch my other videos that I talk about. In part 1 we talked about how I just start consuming scripture. I'll take a huge chunk of scripture, sometimes the whole book, and I'll just start looking at it, seeing what's happening, get the gist of what's happening in there. I read the Bible, and I also do, I guess you call it audio book of the Bible as well. So I listen to it a lot, I read it a lot, and try to get the whole big picture of what might be happening. Then I move on from there eventually, and I get to where I'm reading just the crux of the scripture that I'm going to be covering. So, the section of scripture, the story, or whatever it is that I'm going to be talking about. I do that. I'm just observing the scripture. I'm seeing what it's saying. I'm not putting my own spin on it. I'm not thinking too much about the lesson just yet. I'm just getting to know what is actually said in the scriptures. From there, I move on to part 3. Start breaking down words and ideas that are in that scriptures, things that are jumping out at me, things that seem out of place that I might want to look into further. I gave several examples of those in my last video. So today we're going to start fleshing out the actual teaching that I'm going to be doing in the classroom setting. And so we're going to be in Mark 1 again, same scripture that we were before, Mark 1, 21 through 28. I was giving this some thought yesterday and some prayer, and see, like, if I was teaching this lesson, which I'm not, but if I was teaching this lesson, what would I cover, and what's the main idea of the lesson that I'm doing here? So the main idea is that Jesus performs a miracle, and that miracle is he heals a man with an unclean spirit. And so we talked yesterday about how to find out what an unclean spirit is, and see all the places in the Bible that it talks about that sort of thing. But today I figure I'd concentrate on something that is still in that same vein of what Jesus is doing, but maybe we could flesh out a little bit more why these things are happening. So the scripture starts out, and they went to Capernaum, and immediately on the Sabbath he entered the synagogue and was teaching. So we touched briefly yesterday on who they was, and immediately, and Sabbath, and we talked about all these things. So, but I thought it was interesting. I said, okay, and they went to Capernaum. When I was looking at that, I thought, okay, what was special about Capernaum that these things were happening? Maybe nothing was special about it. But as I started looking into it, Capernaum was very instrumental in Jesus' ministry. A lot of things happened there. It's a weird place because it's not named by name in the Old Testament. So we get into the Gospels, and so that stands out because you think, with all the history and things that are surrounding Jesus and all the prophecies that he has to fulfill, why this town that goes unnamed in the Old Testament? So I began looking into it, and so one of the first things I did was I pulled up a map of Israel, and you can see here, so I just typed in Capernaum map, and I see, where it's located, see if this would, bring anything to light. It's near the Sea of Galilee. You see Chorazin and Bethsaida there. You can click on a different map, and it kind of shows you there's Capernaum. It talks about in the other scripture, it talks about once his fame spread everywhere throughout all the surrounding region of Galilee. So it says, hey, this is the region of Galilee right here, the Sea of Galilee and all that stuff. We have Nazareth, where Jesus was from. We have Cana right there. That's where he went to perform his first miracle, the water into wine. And then it shows us, so there's several times in the Bible where it says he had to go through Samaria to get to Jerusalem. And so we get a good idea of where this is at. Okay, so I did a quick search of Capernaum on Blue Letter Bible, And so it shows us all the places that is mentioned in the New Testament with Capernaum. So I started, reading through these and seeing if there's a pattern, or see if we can find out why, um, possibly why these unclean spirits were in the place, and why Jesus talked about and visited Capernaum so much. So, we have a few stories in Matthew about him going into Capernaum. This is the time where Jesus, the centurion came to him and said, "Hey, my son is sick," and he said, "Let's go visit your son." And he said, "No, I have men under me just like you do. I know what it is to be in a place of authority," which was interesting because we saw in the previous lesson yesterday that he taught as one who had authority. So in Capernaum, same place, this centurion comes to him and said, "I know what it is to have authority. I tell my men, go and do this, and they go and do it. And so you don't have to come to my house. You can just speak a thing and it will happen." And Jesus spoke, and his son was healed at that very hour, is what Scripture says. And then he says, "Surely I haven't seen such faith in all of Israel." And so this centurion was not an Israelite. He was a Gentile. And so that was interesting to me. And then another interesting lesson, or part of the lesson, could be that when it was talking about Capernaum, he did, all these miracles he did. I mean, you can go and look into it and see all these miracles that he did in Capernaum. And then later in his ministry, he says, "O Capernaum, which are exalted to heaven, shall you be brought down to hell? For if the mighty works which have been done in you had been done in Sodom and Gomorrah, it would have remained to this day." And so basically he's saying, like, all these great things that I've done for you are not going to be useful to you. All these, this faith of the centurion that he found at Capernaum, that's going to be of no use to you. In fact, these things are going to be hindrances for you. You're going to be punished because these great things happened to you, and you still didn't believe in me. And so I would probably form my lesson around this thought. Like, it doesn't matter that he was driving out evil spirits, because it didn't change the heart of the people. And if I was looking to, I was like, well, why didn't it change the heart of the people? Like, what is Jesus trying to show us in the whole of his message that can be found in this section of Scripture? I would probably cover something where it says, "What is this? A new teaching with authority." So they were all amazed at this brand new teaching. Like God, this Jesus person, he's doing these amazing things, and he has authority, and he has power, and he has all these things, but yet it was not beneficial to them at all. And while I was looking at this, a scripture rang into my head, where it said, where the people were asking for signs and miracles. They were asking Jesus to do something specific, and he said, or they asked him for a sign for to show his authority to do these things, and he said, "Surely no sign will be given to you. You already have Moses and the prophets." And so that's significant, I think, in this section of Scripture, because it's talking about, like, they're amazed at this new teaching. He goes on and later tells them, "Hey, y'all are amazed at this brand new teaching with authority, but I'm telling you that will do you no good. The signs and wonders and miracles will do you no good if you don't look. You already have Moses and the prophets. They already instructed you on the way to be and to live. So you need to go figure out that thing, not look for this brand new thing." Now, granted, this was a fantastic thing in here, but in the end, they will end up worse than Sodom and Gomorrah. Because they saw these great things, it looks like they actually became a stumbling block for them. Like they were so enamored with this brand new thing that they left the old things behind. They did not pay attention to them. They didn't pay attention to the teachings of Moses and the prophets. So therefore, in the end, they will perish. You can tie that back into how his fame spread everywhere, and people started knowing his name, and it goes on through the rest of chapter 1, where it talks about people started bringing the sick to him to heal, and they started doing all these things, but none of these things were beneficial to the people. Like, even though he was doing these things, and it was beneficial to some of them. Some of them naturally received their word, but most of them didn't. Based on scripture, most of them didn't receive this word because they had left what had been taught by Moses and the prophets. They no longer paid any attention to them. They were just paying attention to this brand new teaching. So in conclusion, that's kind of how I might sum up a lesson like this, and start formulating, apply. I would bring in different scriptures like I just did, probably a few more, and let scripture interpret itself and talk about Capernaum and several of the other things that happen in that region, and flesh this out. Of course, at this time, I am taking a lot of notes, scratching out what I do want to include. Usually, if I have notes, I'm prioritizing. I make sure I want to cover this point or this point, and then if I have room or if time allows, I can cover these other things, but I have the main crux of what I'm wanting to talk about, and I start formulating that in my mind and on paper. And this may take me, sometimes it happens in a day, sometimes it happens in a few days, where I flesh these ideas out. There's only so much that you can cover in an hour, so I've been doing it long enough where I can kind of gauge that and know how much information I can shoot out to fill a space of time, without going over or without ending 30 minutes early, or things like that. So in part 4, that's what I'm doing. I'm honing in on a certain part of the scripture and breaking it down. Also entailed in this part 4 of scripture is, so we've seen the observation of scripture in lessons 1 and 2. We've seen the interpretation of scriptures in lesson 3, and then this lesson again, lesson 4. And I start, as I'm interpreting scripture and coming up with my game plan, I'm also figuring out how that applies to me as a teacher and how it applies to the people that I'm speaking to. So we have observation, observation, interpretation, application. And so as I'm talking about Capernaum, and these new things and these new teachings and Jesus' fame and all those types of things, I can mold that into how that's applicable with us. We surround ourselves with certain types of teachers because we have itching ears. We're always looking for a new thing. We're excited about people that babble in tongues without interpretation. We're excited about a brand new gospel singer, or a brand new gospel group, or Christian music group. We get excited about those things. We're always looking for the next brand new thing, when Jesus is trying to tell us that we need to look backwards. We need to look at the teachings that have always been before us, and maybe, we can, even though he's not naming these things specifically in the scripture, we can start applying the idea, the principle, into our own lives and how we do the very same things that these people in Capernaum do. And it all sounds holy, and it all sounds great, and like we're worshiping God and we're doing what he wants us to do. But in the end, this whole region gets destroyed. Like, these people do not end up being saved. And so, we could talk about how, we need to move towards being pious and not so flashy and more humble. And, there's a bunch of different ways that you can go with it, but in the fleshing out, I also start thinking about how I'm going to present this as something that could be applicable to our lives. So tomorrow we're going to talk about kind of my final step. It's probably not what you would think. It's certainly counterintuitive when you think about it, but We'll talk about these things tomorrow. Thank you for tuning into the page. Like and subscribe, and we'll see you tomorrow. Thank you.